but let's jump into a little bit. I think the first thing that we can maybe start with, I'm pretty sure you saw the infographic that I put up about the mini hats of the regional manager. And it's probably one of the most pseudo-viral things that I've ever put out. It got a ton of responses, a ton of people who um, almost, I would like to say it was a surprising number of people, but I don't think it really was. I don't think it would be for either of us. But I guess the premise of that to fill people in, if they hadn't seen it, was the job from the transition from being a property manager to a regional manager is by far the hardest in the industry. And some of the biggest reasons for that are you go from being the person who does things to the person who makes sure things get done. And when you spent your whole life doing things, it's a really, really challenging transition for people to make. And based on the responses to that post, like I said, it's probably the most viral thing I've posted in a very long time. It feels like that sentiment's felt everywhere. So maybe we could start with, you're obviously COO of Bellaire now, but you didn't start there. So maybe like a quick origin story, and then we could skip up to your first experiences as a regional, and then how you're thinking about that now. Probably too many questions in one, but that's okay. With your teams. So we can start with like origin story, and then we'll kind of walk our way through it.
Sure. So I started in the industry in 2008 as a community assistant, leasing apartments for my rent to be paid for, my $400 a month rent. And I worked at that property after I graduated. I traveled with, it was an individual owner. I wasn't working for a property management company. We had a document that was on Word that was our lease that we edited. So I had no idea about fair housing. I didn't know about anything back then. It was like, boss says to do it, you do it.
1995, I made for $240 rents.
I wish. I'm just kidding. That ages me more. So I would say like I was there for a few years. I joined RPM, which is where Stephen and I know each other, Roscoe Properties at the time in 2012. I would say that's really where my career started to take off. I started as an assistant manager on a student property. That's why they hired me, because I had student experience. We had a small portfolio of deals in North Campus, a little bit in West Campus at the time. And I became a property manager pretty quickly, really rode the wave of extreme growth with Roscoe. A lot of rehabs, one property after another. We wouldn't get them stable in the renovation process before I was moving on to another deal. And I became a regional manager in 2013. And that opportunity came to me because I was good at being a property manager. And I think this is where you find that challenge of, I'm really good at this role. I've mastered it. Now, how do I flip to being more of that leader and not the doer? And that was the most challenging transition for me, as Stephen said earlier. And I remember one time specifically, I was working on a Saturday at our corporate office, entering purchase orders for, I don't know, tile backsplash or something for a renovation we were doing. And it was a bunch of work that honestly my manager should have been doing, but I thought I was helping my manager by doing the work. So I'm in the office, I'm processing invoices and POs and just doing a bunch of admin work. And Stephen comes in. I'm like, what are you doing here? He's like, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be doing this work. You should be monitoring your managers that are doing this work. I don't know. Did we see each other in the office on a Saturday again?
We saw each other on Saturdays like consistently for about like 6 weeks. It's how
Like, did you give it up yet?
yeah. It was, and I think there's a couple of interesting things there. One is, and you mentioned you thought you were helping them.
Yeah.
And that's so common in our industry and in what we do. And I can totally appreciate why, because if you've worked on site, you have so much empathy for the people who work on site. It's easy to think and project yourself to like, I remember the days when I felt overwhelmed and I had a lot of POs to do, or I had a lot of payables to enter, or whatever it happened to be. So because you want to, be that different type of regional manager maybe, or you've been thinking for a while about the promotion, about, how you're going to do it differently when you're in that seat. And the instinct is to help. And that's true. Like, you want to help, but you don't want to help by taking things necessarily off of someone's plate. Because it feels like helping them, it's actually hurting them. And more importantly, it's also hurting you. you're robbing them of the opportunity to learn, and you're robbing yourself also of the opportunity to grow because you're spending time doing other stuff. Now, again, there's lots of reasons. Like there's a comfort, I'm sure, of like, I know how to do this, so I'm going to gravitate towards doing this. And that's also natural. Um,
I
but
also thought that's like what a servant leader did. Like, what are the areas you need help with when I go to the properties? Like, oh, I haven't gotten to all this admin work. I'm like, great, that's what I'm going to take off. Instead of teaching, here's how you're going to better balance that for yourself. Do an admin hour in the morning or whatever it was that was a tool. And I think the challenge is like, there is no training going from a manager to a regional. So you're just out there trying to make it with whatever your needs are of your properties.
yeah, absolutely. And it feels like a lot of times you maybe spend, um, anywhere from 6 to 18 months for a lot of regional managers kind of trapped in that, what I would call being a multi-site property manager.
Yeah.
And it's the sooner you can figure out that your job is to teach and help and guide people into doing things, the sooner then that you'll be able to actually start learning and growing in your position.
Absolutely.
So cool. So then that was regional manager. This is a little bit like how we bonded, of me giving you a very hard time, like every Saturday for several weeks. And for context, she would throw it back at me, like, what are you doing here? And my response was, I'm doing things to make my week easier. Like I'm helping me. I'm not doing work for others. And I can say for sure that I think everyone at the company at the time noticed when that switch flipped for you. Because it changed everything about not only how you operated, but also your team. So your team ultimately got better because you were holding them accountable and setting expectations a little bit differently, as opposed to being a crutch. Anytime you're a crutch, this is a warning to like people out there, crutches become prosthetics like super quick, like permanent additions. So when you're being a crutch for somebody, you're not really, again, allowing them to grow, but they get used to having that crutch.
Right.
And then when you do shift later, at some point, that's going to be that much harder of a transition for them.